Most gift shops sell something with a frog on it because frogs are so popular. I mean, we've all seen Kermit the Frog, that puppet worth millions. But how much is a real frog worth? You're about to meet some folks who would tell you a real frog is priceless. Biologist John Jensen and amphibian specialist Robert Hill are on a mission to save a frog. Not just any frog, a gopher frog. They used to be common in South Georgia, but the population has dwindled to an alarming low. So one bright, chilly morning, we all walked to a pond several hours south of Atlanta near the Alabama line. To save this frog, they need its eggs. So the search is on.
Depending on the size of the adult female that laid the eggs, young ones lay about tangerine-sized globs. Big adult females lay almost grapefruit-sized globs, and they'll be usually attached to a stem of grass or any other kind of erect stem in the water, and it'll be just kind of a gelatinous glob with a bunch of little black or brown dots all in it.
All right. Gelatinous globs with dots.
Yeah.
I got it.
They feel really nice.
This seems a bit like searching for a needle in a haystack, but we push on, looking for, the best I can tell, big balls of slime just below the surface of the water. It was exciting at first, but most of what I see is another kind of gelatinous glob.
This is the stuff we're finding that is just algae, but it looks like it should be an egg.
Biologists, on the other hand, know what to look for. John has located the first egg mass. It's like holding a handful of Jell-O. It even moves like Jell-O. Can I feel it?
Sure.
I'm not going to hurt it, Emma.
No, we're going to take some of it anyway.
Oh, wow, yeah. The little black dots that look like commas will someday be frogs. We hope. So that's a little tadpole.
Yep. Right when they're first laid, it's a perfectly spherical dark dot there. And then as it starts to develop, it forms more of a comma shape, and then the gelatin stuff will start to deteriorate and they'll hatch out.
Tadpoles are pretty amazing little creatures. Once hatched, they sit on the bottom of a pond or stay close against something like grass, living off of a yolk sac. Now, am I correct in assuming that their chances being raised by you folks are better than living out here where they're just food source for fish and birds and everything else?
Oh, absolutely. They're, very, very few of these eggs end up resulting in an adult gopher frog, but this pond is a really good site. There's, in a good year, you'll have close to 100 breeding females in here, so 100 of those egg masses. Each egg mass has between 2,000 and 5,000 eggs in it. It sounds promising, but most tadpoles never make it to adulthood. This search for eggs is part of a joint project to make sure they do. The Department of Natural Resources, better known as DNR, works with many partners, including the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, UGA, Zoo Atlanta, the Jones Center, Bear Hollow Zoo, and the Nature Conservancy. Why so many? Because all of these agencies believe it is important to increase the populations of gopher frogs before they face extinction. Oh, here's a fresh one. Yes.
More eggs go into the bucket and get prepped for the long ride back to Atlanta. There is great diversity in this region, and there is more than one kind of egg mass in this pond.
That's southern leopard frog.
These will be many southern leopard frogs.
I'm not moving my hand, they're just wiggling.
But the leopard frog eggs will be left behind. They aren't in any immediate danger, unlike the gopher frog. These guys aren't the prettiest frog out there, and their mating call sounds like someone being rude at the dinner table. They live in burrows made by other animals like gopher tortoises. Habitat loss is the big issue for this frog because it needs both sandy forested areas, but it also has to have isolated wetlands for breeding. And much of this type of habitat has been developed or altered. There is such great diversity in areas like this, but it often goes unnoticed. So many of the creatures that live in this environment are small, and they survive by hiding. Most frogs fall into that category. You don't often see them, and if they see you, they will quickly disappear. Which leads to the question, if you never see something, do you care if it disappears? According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, 1/3 of the world's 6,000 amphibian species face extinction. 122 amphibian species have gone extinct in the last 25 years. More than 400 amphibian species are listed as critically endangered. Even so, it begs the question, does this really matter? Isn't extinction natural? UGA professor John Mayers gave this response.
There are some people who believe that the rate of extinction is somewhat unprecedented, and so it's in that regard, maybe it is something to be concerned about. As an ecologist, I would say that, if a large proportion of species on this planet wink out, including us, there will be, just like in the past, there will be this massive explosion and repopulation of the Earth with things. The question is, will we be part of that? And are we okay if we're not?
There are other reasons to be concerned about something like the gopher frog. That frog is connected to an entire habitat that has declined. The longleaf pines, gopher tortoises, indigo snakes, red cockaded woodpeckers. They all need the same kind of landscape, so researchers are trying to save all these things. At the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, the eggs will hatch out and the tadpoles will develop for about 4 to 6 months until they're old enough to release.
There's a lot of eggs.
In other tanks, there are species that also face extinction. The splendid leaf frog faces habitat loss in another part of the world, Costa Rica. This frog blends in so well with the leaf, you would never see it. Their defense mechanism is to flash those bright orange-yellow patches in hopes of scaring a predator away.
A lot of the colors that we have in fashion and in art and things like that come from these creatures like this, animals like this. He is beautiful.
Isn't he just an amazing frog?
Oh, something. And the stripes, it's almost...
And in nature, generally speaking, when you have bright, bold markings like that, that means they're toxic. And this frog does contain some toxins. And they can make a pretty good distance when they jump. You see, they got these really long kind of telescoping legs.
Oh, yeah.
Here's another beauty, the lemur frog. Those eyes are mesmerizing. It likes to hide out on the underside of leaves. Lemur frogs are found in Central and South America, but they too are critically endangered. They depend on rainforest habitat, which is shrinking. But it is the chytrid fungus disease that has knocked down their numbers. Chytrid fungus disease is also hurting this guy, the horned marsupial frog. It's a pretty wild-looking thing and has a unique system of reproduction. After the female lays eggs, the male fertilizes them, then places them into a pouch on her back. they will grow into froglets and emerge fully developed. But this frog, native to Colombia and Ecuador, is also in trouble. As I learned on another trip with John Jensen, frog disease is not something exotic that only occurs in other countries. It is a serious problem worldwide, and scientists aren't completely sure how it began or how to stop it.
We have no way of curing this right now. The chytrid fungus, you can cure infected frogs in the lab and keep them from developing it again, but there's no way to really treat the environment.
There are other diseases. For example, this pond was full of tadpoles. They covered the surface, but a virus wiped them out in a matter of days.
So what are we looking for, John?
We're looking for wood frog tadpoles. They bred in here, the adults bred about 3 weeks ago. I came and monitored that breeding effort, and there were about 70 egg masses over in that corner each. That many
70 big masses?
Right, up to 5,000 tadpoles or eggs that are going to eventually develop into tadpoles. So this pond should be just loaded with tadpoles. They should have hatched out. They have hatched out by now. There should be clouds of tadpoles all over here, and there's none.
So is this like what they call a massive die-off?
It's exactly that.
Do you know what causes it?
We do. This is documented as ranavirus, a disease that affects several southeastern species, but in Georgia we only, this is the only pond that we've really studied this disease and really know what's going on with it.
Everything that touches water gets dipped in bleach. It's about all they can do at this point. Nearby, in a smaller pond, we see what should have been present in the other one.
And do you have any idea how big they actually get before they begin to die off?
Yeah, not much bigger than this.
Wow.
They're probably close to starting to die off here. I mean, we already know that they laid the eggs the same time in these ponds as they did in the other pond, where we see no tadpoles at all.
This pond is in the shade, so the wood frog eggs hatched later. But John Jensen is adamant about one thing. If we come back in a week, they will all be gone. As other diseases have emerged, scientists are playing a game of catch-up, trying to figure out what's going on.
It is alarming in that regard, you know, when we realize that we're losing things at a rate faster than we either know how to manage it, or to understand what we're losing, or understand the consequences of that. I think that genuinely fits, in my opinion, under the category of an alarming rate of decline. And it's been very rapid. I mean, the amphibian crisis is not something where it's been a gradual thing that we've become aware of. It's been a very rapid loss of species over the last, several decades, and it seems to be increasing.
Water is another major issue. The limited supply and all the things we put into it.
For instance, to use an example, in the Midwest, we have the Ozark hellbender, which is critically endangered now. But one of the issues is that the males are becoming basically feminized, and they're not breeding because they're getting all of these extra hormones in the water that are, with amphibians, they're so sensitive, they absorb all of these things into their body, and extra hormones, along with other chemicals, even antidepressants that, a lot of the compounds pass through our bodies and our urine, we don't even think about it going into the water table of the water system, and this can seriously affect them.
That's why Robert Hill spends days searching for hellbenders in the Chattahoochee National Forest in Union County.
They're more famously known as giant salamanders. Definitely the largest salamander in the United States.
They are rare, only found in a few rivers and streams in Georgia. They live at least 20 years, but biologists are seeing declines in this population too.
Hellbenders are really territorial, so they kind of pick their own flat rock and they stay under it, and that's their territory. They chase off and attack other hellbenders that try to steal it. So it's really tough for them to find a territory in the first place, and then really tough for them to keep it. So to help minimize the stress as much as possible, we flag all of the rocks where we find them, so that way we can put each hellbender right back under its own rock. You see the wrinkles on the sides. They have kind of these folds of skin all down the side. That's to increase the surface area of their skin so they can better absorb the oxygen in these cold mountain streams.
Amphibians are cold-blooded vertebrates. These animals can live in water and on land and are among the oldest organisms on Earth. They are extremely important for the ecosystem since they act as both predator and prey. Without them, populations of mosquitoes and cockroaches would explode. Because their skin takes in both water and oxygen, they are supreme indicators of what's going on in the environment. And they make some of the most beautiful sounds on Earth.
Tell me what we're hearing.
We're hearing frogs right now. That sound is the Puerto Rican coqui. It's native to and endemic to the island of Puerto Rico. The other sound, the trilling, is the phantasmal poison frog. It's a very neat little frog about this big with brown and green stripes from Ecuador. This higher pitched whistle is the Barbados whistling frog. It's a Caribbean native, and this time of day they really like to get going.
How can such a little thing make that big noise? The sound is produced when a frog pushes air from its lungs across its vocal cords. But frogs also have a vocal sac, that piece of skin that bulges out. That vocal sac acts like an amplifier as the frog cycles air back and forth between its mouth and lungs. While gopher frogs may not have such a lovely call, during breeding season, to an egg-laying female, this sounds like Luther Vandross. We've waited weeks while in the tanks our gopher frog eggs have developed, and they're about to take a long trip to a pond owned and protected by the Nature Conservancy. Again, we're hours south of Atlanta, near Blakely, Georgia. On a steamy summer night, we join Robert and John Jensen to release the babies in their new home.
You just drop them on the ground?
Yep.
I don't have to gently place them?
Nope. Don't drop them from shoulder height, but they're pretty tough little froggies.
Oh, they sure are. One just jumped out. All right. Come here, little buddy. So why is it a good idea to do this at night?
100% humidity. These things are, very susceptible to drying out. Because it's 100% humidity at night, it's the best time for them to disperse into the uplands. This species of frog, is not a wetland frog, so we're putting them in the water just because in all this vegetation. There's a lot more cover for them, so they can kind of get acclimated to the site without having to be too obvious to predators here.
What kind of frog is that I hear?
That's a southern cricket frog. And they're small enough to be food for these guys.
What a cool noise. I haven't heard one before.
Sounds like two marbles clicking together.
Yeah.
In all, we released more than 400 baby frogs, and we'll come back to release even more.
It's unfortunate that we're getting to this kind of desperation where to maintain this species, we have to reintroduce them rather than just manage and maintain known populations. We're just down to just a few left in the state, so.
Is it really that dire?
I believe so, yeah. We've really only got 4 or 5 natural populations in the wild right now of Georgia, and some of those populations, have been reduced to just a few adults.
No one is sure this experiment will work. UGA students Sean Sterrett and Cassandra Skaggs have corralled some of the frogs in pens to study how well they survive in this new environment.
We were interested in figuring out if they will survive, if they'll do better in areas that have gopher in some type of supplemental burrow. And so what we did was we came out and we pounded PVC pipe, 2-inch PVC piping into the ground. We thought that would kind of create this burrow-like structure that the animal could use if they can find it. And we definitely have found that they use them.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's why this study is really cool, because we'll be able to see if they really do rely on burrows for survival. So yeah, so we'll be able to compare it and see how they survive.
We found one that was being taken by fire ants. Man, it's rough on these guys. The point of the study is to figure out if these guys survive or not. So we're not supposed to be, rescuing them, but it's hard not to. Let's try.
Some of the frogs pulled out are dead, but others have established themselves in burrows. But will they make it to adulthood? That's the real unknown. It's also why so many frogs are being released. Months after that first release, I return with John Jensen to free the last frogs. Since we first started, it looks like a different landscape. The pond has dried significantly from lack of rain.
I feel like there should be some bands or something. This is the last batch.
Last, yep, born free.
So how many frogs altogether?
I don't know the exact count, but it's around 1,300 metamorphs that
Good
we've
grief.
released. Yep,
Now you call them
metamorphs. Or you can call them froglets. They're kind of in the transition between a tadpole and a frog, but they've lost their tail, so they're more frog-like. So
or if you're like a normal non-biologist person, you could call them a baby frog.
You sure could. Fine.
Okay.
So you ready?
Yeah. I see you. This is your new home, buddy. Come on. Look at all this nice grass. Lots of muck. There you go. Come on. There you go. It's pretty cool.
It's heading in the right direction for the now.
Mm-hmm.
They still have a lot of challenges. These baby frogs make a nice bite-sized meal for many predators.
So out of 1,300, you'll be really happy if 100 make it.
Yeah, I would say 100 would be a optimistic number. So we're doing that every year for probably 5 years, and hopefully after that period, enough of them will survive, and they'll have their own self-sustaining population after that point.
Does it make you feel good about trying to reestablish a population, a species that is in so much trouble?
Absolutely, but I've also got to hedge that with the fact that we don't know if this is going to be successful or not. This is experimental. I have great optimism for it to be a successful project, but it's going to take a couple years before we really know. But if we come back in a few years and there's gopher frog egg masses all out in this pond, I'll have a big smile on my face.
And then, one last frog.
Congratulations.
All right.
Good job.
It may seem like overkill to some people, this much effort for one species, but there used to be abundant populations of this frog until acres of longleaf pine were turned into farmland to grow cotton. When something so common faces the prospect of extinction, biologists grow concerned about the entire ecosystem connected to that species.
To the average person, a gopher frog may not be that interesting. It's this kind of big gray lump, big fat frog that eats other frogs and lives in a tortoise hole. But it's part of the bigger ecosystem. And the way I look at it is, this is a species that we have directly affected. We have destroyed its habitat, and I think we owe it a debt.
We continue to lose frog habitat, A national study shows more than 630,000 acres of wetlands have been lost in just 5 years, most of it in the southeast. That's like losing 500,000 football fields every year.
So let's go back to the question I asked at the beginning of the show. How much is a real frog worth? Well, consider this. Research continues on a painkiller more powerful than morphine that came from a frog. And at Vanderbilt, scientists discovered that peptides from some frogs can block HIV cells. Imagine a possible cure for AIDS. Amphibians may be the future of our medicine cabinet, and that could be worth trillions. I'm Sharon Collins. We'll see you next time.